Welcome to another episode of our live stream, My Journey to the Trinity. My name is Hussein, and I'm happy to be with you. And um, today, while I was out doing some chores, and I got to thinking about some things that Muhammad commanded Muslims to do, but the Muslims don't do them. And I've talked about some other stuff that Muhammad has commanded Muslims to do that they don't do. Um, if we look at just look at some of the verses that we have these verses where let me look here. Oops, not that one. Okay. Am I showing the wrong thing here? I'm thinking I didn't really copy what I needed to copy here. Okay. Well, we can just go ahead and read it actually in the Quran, where Muslims are commanded to obey Muhammad without um, any resistance. Here's one of those verses. It says in Arabic, "Kul ati'u Allah wa Rasul." Okay, say, obey Allah and obey the Messenger. Uh, and if you turn away, Allah does not love the disbelievers. And the translation isn't very good there, the English translation, but here's another one, Surah An-Nur 24:54. It says, obey Allah and obey the Messenger. Ati'u Allah wa ati'u al-Rasul. Ti' in Arabic is ti'u. The word ti' in Arabic means obey. Ti'u with the O at the end, it becomes plural. It's like you're commanding a bunch of people to do it. Okay, so that's why it says ti'u. And here with Muhammad 47:33, it says, Ya ayyuhalladeen amanu ati'u Allah wa ati'u ar-Rasul. O you who believe, obey Allah and obey the Messenger. Okay, so, and it's in there many more times, okay, that you're supposed to obey Allah and Muhammad, okay, both of them. And there's a other verse, which I've shown many times, that says that if when you obey Muhammad, you should have no resistance in yourself to what Muhammad decides. So, whatever Muhammad decides, you need to obey it 100% with no resistance in yourself in order to be a real Muslim. Okay. And there's no, it says tislimu tasliman. I mean, it's like a complete surrender. Okay. And so I just want to show you those verses first, the verses in the Quran that command Muslims to obey Muhammad. It's not optional. Obeying him is there, and this is like about 14 times you see this in the Quran, and it's a requirement, and it also puts obeying Muhammad on the same level with obeying Allah. Okay, so it's not optional to obey him. So, but I want to show one way that it's impossible to obey him. I want to show you one way that it is impossible to obey Muhammad. Okay, because I'm going to show you one of his commands. And here, let me show you this, something Muhammad said that's impossible to obey. Okay, and this is a Sahih Hadith. It says, the Messenger of Allah said, take the Quran from four. From Ibn Mas'ud, Ubay ibn Ka'b, Mu'adh bin Jabal, and Salim, the freed slave of Abu Hudayfa. Really, Salim? Interesting. You guys, what's interesting to me about this, okay, something that I've never noticed before, is that of the four, uh, we know very well Abdullah bin Mas'ud uh, and Ubay bin Ka'b, they're very prominent. Okay, but one that I've never really paid attention to is Salim, the freed slave of Abu Hudayfa. What's interesting about Salim, you're supposed to take the Quran from him. What's interesting about him is if you remember the story of the breastfeeding, where a woman came to Muhammad and said that Abu Hudayfa is very upset because Salim keeps coming in and seeing her without the hijab, because they raised him and so he lived in their house. Well, when this woman told this to Muhammad, that's when Muhammad said, breastfeed Salim. Breastfeed. Who was she to breastfeed? She was to breastfeed Salim. And then the wife said, but Salim is a grown man. He's he's like a teenager, he's not like a little boy. And it says Muhammad smiled and said, I know he's grown. Breastfeed him. And so she did. And then she came back and said, oh, he's not jealous anymore. So interesting that he would be one of the ones that Muhammad said, take the Quran from him. You guys, this is something, sometimes every time you do something, you learn something new. And that's something that I didn't know before. So good morning, Marian. Good morning, Emmanuel. God bless you. I saw your video, Emmanuel, when you were running 6 miles. How far did you run today? You were at 5 Mile Point when you did the video. I used to run 5 miles a day, by the way, when I was in college. Now I could run about 500 feet, but yeah, so, but really, this is very interesting, you guys. Shoot, you know what? That makes me want to go back here, you guys, and look at this. Okay, you guys. Wow. The plot thickens, you guys. This is very I never knew this, you guys. Wow. This is okay. It says Sahla bint Suhail came to the Prophet and said, O Messenger of Allah, I see signs of displeasure on the face of Abu Hudayfa, when that's her husband, when Salim enters upon me. The Prophet said, breastfeed him. And she said, how can I breastfeed him when he's a grown man? The Messenger of Allah smiled and said, I know he's a grown man. So she did what he said, and she came to the Prophet and said, I have never again seen signs of displeasure in the face of Abu Hudayfa after that. And he was present at the battle of Abu Badr. What's interesting here, you guys, is the young man Muhammad told the woman to breastfeed is one of the four people that Muhammad said to take the Quran from. Wow. Shoot. Wow. Okay. And he was freed. He was freed also. Not only was he the one who was breastfed, but he was also freed. And so Muhammad said, take the Quran from him. Wow. Interesting. Learn something new every day. So, okay. So anyway, well, that's not really our subject, but that's something we found out along the way here, and we will continue with our subject. Okay. Wow, I didn't know that, you guys. That really is mind blowing. That's really mind blowing. That shoot. All right. Well, let's look at another place because this order is repeated more than once in the hadith. It says Abdullah bin Amir mentioned Abdullah bin Mas'ud and said, I shall ever love that man, for I heard the Prophet saying, take the Quran from four: Abdullah bin Mas'ud, Salim, Mu'adh, and Ubay bin Ka'b. Okay, so the Muhammad said, take the Quran from four people: Abdullah bin Mas'ud, Ubay bin Ka'b, Salim, the freed slave, and Mu'adh. Now, I don't know much about Mu'adh, but we'll find out more about him. And so, anyway, Muhammad said, take the Quran. If you're going to take the Quran from anybody, take it from these four. These are the best people to take who memorize the Quran, according to Muhammad. And you're supposed to obey him like you obey Allah. Okay? And, well, um, the problem is, uh, the problem is you cannot take the Quran from at least two of those people and obey Muhammad perfectly. The reason being is um, because Abdullah bin Mas'ud in his Quran had only 112 surahs. Okay, he did not have the Fatiha. He did not have what's called the chapter 114 and 113. So his Quran was 111 surahs, actually. 111 surahs. Let's just look at that. Okay, what it says. It says Abdullah bin Mas'ud was asked as to why he did not write the Fatiha in his Mus'haf. Okay, the Fatiha is the number one surah in the Quran. He didn't have it in his. He replied, if I were to write it, I would write it before every surah. He said if he was to write the Fatiha, the short surah number one, which is really a prayer more than it is like a chapter, or he said he put it in front of every surah rather than it just being once at the beginning of the Quran. Interesting. Abu Bakr al-Anbari explains this saying, every rak'ah in prayer starts with the Fatiha, and then another surah is recited. It is as if Ibn Mas'ud said, I have dropped it for the sake of brevity, and I have trusted its preservation by Muslim. Okay, so if you were to take his Quran, though, if you were to obey Muhammad and take the Quran from him, then you would be disobeying Uthman, because his Quran had 114 surahs. Okay, and let me show you one more thing about Mas'ud, Ibn Mas'ud. It says, report from Ar-Rahman. Abdul Rahman bin Yazid related, Ibn Mas'ud erased al-Mu'awzitain from his Mus'haf and said they were not part of the Quran. Now, the tain at the end means there's two. And it was Surah 113 and Surah 114. He erased them from his Quran. So he didn't have the Fatiha and he didn't have the last two surahs. The last two surahs are called Al-Falaq wal Nas. He did not have those two surahs. So there were three surahs missing from Abdullah ibn Mas'ud's Quran. Now, Muhammad commanded Muslims to take the Quran from Abdullah ibn Mas'ud. Well, how can you take it from him if he doesn't have three surahs? Three surahs that he doesn't have. And you about the last two surahs, uh, Surah Al-Falaq, Surah Al-Nas, that's Surah 113 and Surah 114. Those two came down supposedly when Muhammad was under black magic. And these two men came and sat at his head and at his feet, and they gave him these two surahs to break the witchcraft off of him, to break the witchcraft that had come on him, that he'd been under for a whole year. And so those two were kind of like spell breakers, those two surahs, 113 and 114. And so Abdullah bin Mas'ud said, no, I'm not going to put them in my Quran. So they weren't in his Quran. Okay. And all right. So if you were to obey Muhammad perfectly, like the Quran says you're supposed to, it says obey Allah and the Messenger. You would have his Quran. And Muhammad said, take the Quran from Abdullah bin Mas'ud. But if you do, you have to take three surahs off of the Quran. So you cannot obey Muhammad, or else you have to take three surahs off of the Quran, because he commanded, take the Quran from Abdullah bin Mas'ud. Well, then it gets even worse when you finish out what Muhammad said, because he also said, take it from Ubay ibn Ka'b. Well, if you take it from Ubay ibn Ka'b, the problem with his Quran is it had two extra surahs. Not only did he have all 114, he had two more. He had 116 surahs. And here's something we could read. It says, the argument sprouts with the narrations quoted in the well-known work of Al-Ittiqan by Al-Suyuti. Now, Al-Suyuti, you guys, for those of you who don't know, Al-Suyuti, Jalaluddin Suyuti, you know the Jalalain, the commentary Jalalain. Well, Jalalain means two Jalals, and one of those Jalals is Jalaluddin Suyuti. So Suyuti is a very super highly regarded uh, scholar of Islam, and so this is his book, very famous book, Al-Ittiqan by Suyuti, very famous book. And he says, in the Mus'haf of Ubay, there were written 116 surahs. For towards the end of it, he had written surahs Al-Hafd and Al-Khal. So if you were to obey Muhammad, who said, and you're supposed to, because you're supposed to obey Allah and his messenger, and you're not supposed to have any resistance in you to obeying him. And he said, take the Quran from Abdullah bin Mas'ud and Ubay ibn Ka'b. Well, if you obey Abdullah, you have to remove three surahs from the Quran. Well, if you obey, if you take it from Ubay, you got to add two more surahs to the Quran because he had 116. So you got 111 or 116. Either way, you are changing the Quran. In order to obey that hadith by Muhammad, you have to disobey, you have to change the Quran. And it's impossible to obey that hadith. It's impossible. Because if you obey both of them, one of them has 111, one has 116. If you obey both of them, it's impossible to obey both of them. It's impossible to obey both of them. Okay? And so, anyway, this is another command by Muhammad. Here again says, take the Quran from four: Ibn Mas'ud, Ubay bin Ka'b, Mu'adh bin Jabal, and Salim, the freed slave of Abu Hudayfa. So you can't do it. It's impossible to obey this command by Muhammad. So Muslims don't obey it, and who can blame them? You can't obey it. It's impossible to obey it. And so anyway, yeah, so that's just a little super short live stream I wanted to do today. And Critical Quran. Oh, really? The Critical Quran by is that the one by Robert Spencer? That's interesting. Well, you guys, I do have those two surahs. Let me see if I find it here. Here it is. It says the argument. Okay. Al-Suti himself recorded the wording of the alleged surahs. O Allah, we beg help from you alone, ask forgiveness from you alone, praise you, and are not ungrateful to you, and we are part and break off with all those who are disobedient to you. So these are the other two surahs that Ubay ibn Ka'ab had that are not in today's Quran, that were not in Abdullah bin Mas'ud's Quran. So, and it says, and in the Mus'haf of Ubay, there were 116 surahs, for towards the end of it, he had written surahs Haft and Khal. Okay, so another command that Muslims don't obey, and you can't blame them because they can't obey it. It's impossible to obey this command. Okay, and it says in the Quran, you must obey him with no resistance in yourself. Well, you can't, because if you go this way, you have to take surahs out of the Quran. If you go this way, you got to add surahs to the Quran, and you can't do that. It's impossible. So they don't obey it, but the reason they don't obey it is because they can't obey it. It's impossible. So, okay, by Robert Spencer. Yeah, I have. He sent me a copy of it. So he does include that. Very interesting that he includes it. So 115 and 116. But the Shiites or the Ahmadis, none of them have 115 and 116, right? I mean, I've never heard of anybody who has that. I mean, it's almost universally accepted. There's 114 surahs. And and the problem gets even worse, of course, because there were so many Qur'ans. In the time of Ubay ibn Ka'ab, according to the Islamic Encyclopedia, there were 31 different Qur'ans. Each one of Muhammad's wife had one. Each one of the companions had one. Everybody had a different Qur'an. And then Uthman said, bring me all the different ones, and he burned them, and he came up with his own. Well, Abdullah ibn Mas'ud did not give his Quran, and he did not accept Uthman's Quran. He did not accept Uthman's Quran, and he would not give Uthman his Quran to be burned. So you cannot obey Muhammad. He gave this command, and you cannot obey this command. So, all right, you guys, this was a super, super short live stream, but there's a lot of information in it. So if you take it, I think it gives you some tools to go and witness to Muslims. And so if you haven't done it, please do it now. Jesus, help me. Jesus, forgive me. Jesus, come into my heart. Jesus, help me. Jesus, forgive me. Jesus, come into my heart. يسوع ساعدني. يسوع سامحني. يسوع ادخل قلبي. He loves you. We love you. Thank you guys for being with us. Have a wonderful night. Thanks.
If you have ever wondered why dull apologists lie so much, it's because on a rare occasion that they tell the truth, this happens.
One of the reasons I accepted Islam was the scientific miracles. I'll be honest with you. And now we know that this whole scientific miracles was absolute nonsense.
The standard narrative has holes in it. That's what I'm going to say.